I grew up in a part of the country where the woods were the default place to hang out. Bonfires, dirt bikes, all that. My dad taught me to camp before I could ride a bike. So when people talk about scary camping stories, I usually roll my eyes. Most of the time it's just a raccoon rifling through food or somebody getting turned around on a game trail. This one isn't that. It happened 2 summers ago, last week of August. 4 of us decided to do a 3-night loop in a national forest a few hours from where I live. Nothing crazy, nothing technical. The loop climbed past a couple of lakes, cut along an old logging road, and dropped down into a valley with a creek where we'd camped the last night. My sister Hannah was in, along with her boyfriend Cole, and my best friend Mason. We'd done day hikes together, but never a multi-night backpacking trip. I planned it out, checked water sources, printed the map, told everyone to bring proper gear. I thought I had it under control. We left on a Thursday morning, ate diner pancakes on the way, and hit the trail around noon. It was one of those big, breathing days where the sky is so blue it almost looks fake. The forest felt alive with late summer heat. Grasshoppers kept flying up and pinging off our legs. The first few miles were standard stuff. Shady switchbacks, that piney smell, little puffs of dust every time your foot comes down. We were joking, trading snacks, keeping a nice steady pace. The first weird thing was a stack of rocks right in the middle of the trail. You see cairns along trails sometimes, but this wasn't a cairn to mark a path. It was on the path. 5 flat stones, balanced neatly, with a strip of red ribbon tied around the top one. Not the weathered kind of ribbon you find tangled in the woods from hunters or boundary markers. New ribbon, clean and bright, like it had just come off a spool. We stepped around it and kept going because, okay, maybe someone was being artsy or weird. 5 minutes later, there was another one. Same rock stack, same red ribbon. A little shorter, maybe 4 stones, but same idea. Cole grinned and said some kid had probably gotten bored and made a game. I remember answering something like, "Cool. Well, the game is annoying." After the 3rd stack, the joking stopped. These weren't scattered where people might wander off. They were dead center, like someone wanted to make sure we had to step around them. The forest felt hot and heavy. I told myself it was just the uphill. Still, I noticed we all got quiet without talking about it. The trail flattened out at a saddle, and we took a break under the shade of a fir tree. No wind, no bird song. I pointed at the map to show we'd hit the next creek in about half a mile. Mason was rolling his shoulders, trying to pop his back, and he said, "Did you hear that?" I didn't hear anything. We all stood still and listened. Faint knocking. 3 taps together. Pause. 3 more. Not fast, not frantic. Like someone knocking politely on a door. That's the only way I can describe it. Gentle, patient, like they could wait all day. Cole clapped his hands and shouted hello. The knocking stopped. We waited another minute. Nothing. We wrote it off as a woodpecker that had changed its mind. We put our packs back on and kept walking. The creek was real, cold and clear, and the sound of it did this immediate reset in my brain. Flowing water always drops my shoulders. We filtered some, dunked hats, splashed faces, and decided to follow it a little ways off trail for our first night, since the site I'd planned at the lakes looked exposed on the topo. The creek cut through a small meadow and then into a darker stand of hemlocks. The site we found was perfect. Flat spot under big trees, soft duff, not too many rocks. There was even an old fire ring. We got lucky, I thought. Maybe those rock stacks were just a fluke. We set up camp. I strung up the bear bag line. Hannah and I pitched my tent. Cole and Mason set up theirs. We built a small cooking fire once it got dark and made dinner, and everything felt fine again. Stars came out like salt scattered across black velvet. We did all the normal stuff. Told old stories, roasted marshmallows, made fun of the insane number of dehydrated meals we'd brought because no one communicated. We could hear the creek talking to itself in the distance. The polite knocking didn't come back. I slept like a rock until something woke me up that felt exactly like a hand pressing softly against the outside of my tent near my head. Not a swipe, not a paw, a palm. I bolted upright, heart blowing out my chest. I listened. The woods were so quiet I could hear my breath. I turned my headlamp on, but the tent fabric just lit up white. I didn't want to unzip the door and blind myself by reflecting beam. I froze and waited. 3 gentle knocks. Not on the tent. Out in the trees. Then a voice, very soft and matter-of-fact, said my name. It said my name like my mom does when she's not mad but wants me to come inside. It wasn't Mason or Cole or Hannah. It wasn't whispery or creepy on purpose. It was casual, like, "Hey, you awake?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. The protective animal in my brain took the wheel. I clicked my headlamp off, laid flat, and didn't answer. After a few seconds, the voice said my name again, a little further away. Then I heard footsteps moving toward the creek. Not stomping or crashing. Walking. Morning was rough. I didn't tell anyone what I'd heard right away because I wanted coffee in my system first. Everyone looked a little drawn. I asked how they'd slept, and there was this awkward silence, like we were all trying to decide whether to lie. Mason said, "Weird question, but did anyone hear knocking?" Cole and Hannah both looked at me. I sighed and told them about the voice saying my name. Mason's eyebrows hit his hairline. Hannah said she'd heard something like footsteps moving around camp around 2 a.m, but she'd figured it was me having to pee. Cole laughed and said it was probably a branch dropping pine cones. The laugh sounded thin. We did the normal check around camp. Food was fine. No tracks I could see. The Duff is a terrible tracker, but I didn't see any scuffs around the tents either. We told ourselves it was nerves and caffeine deficit. We packed up and headed back to the loop. The rock stacks continued the second day. Every time I thought I could relax into the rhythm of walking, we'd hit another one. A double stack at a fork we almost missed. One on a little footbridge. At one point, a stack had been built on a mossy boulder, with that red ribbon tied around 2 sticks crossed behind it, like a crude plus sign. We didn't talk about it much after a while. It was like mentioning it out loud would make it more real. Also, by then, we were seeing little bits of litter, and not the candy wrapper type. Tidier stuff. A silver button from a shirt. A clump of someone's hair caught in a piece of bark. I found a Polaroid photo face down on the trail. When I flipped it over, it was a picture of a campsite. It looked like ours from the night before. 2 tents, 2 camp chairs, a bear bag line, and a long log pulled next to the fire ring like a bench. The film had that washed early 2000s look. The sky in the photo was a little overexposed. There were the trees. I swear it was the same shape of logs. I showed the others. That freaked them more than the rocks. Cole said it could have been from anyone. The forest gets a lot of traffic. Old logging road nearby, remember? People camp every year, but the weather had been wet the week before. That photo wasn't warped or smeared. It was crisp. I checked the back. Blank. No date written on it. We put it in a Ziploc and kept going. By the time we reached the first of the lakes, the wind had kicked up. Little wind devils ran across the water. We decided to push past and try for the ridge so we'd have less bugs. Also, I think we wanted to feel like we were moving away from something. The higher we hiked, the more the trees thinned and the sun got hard and white. It felt good to sweat and breathe and let your legs do the thinking. We made the ridge by late afternoon and found a shelf with just enough room for the tents tucked behind a stand of twisted old weather-stunted pines. The view of the valley was ridiculous. Layers of hills fading into blue, the creek a silver thread. We saw a hawk keel into the wind and hang there like a kite. We didn't make a fire up there, too exposed. We cooked on our stoves and ate fast. It got cold quick. I tried to imagine a normal night. We'd climb into our bags, tell a couple dirty jokes across the tents and pass out. 2 days of hiking, we'd be wiped. The first knock came before full dark. 3 taps, patient, from the direction of the drop-off. I don't care how many logical explanations there are for knocking in the forest. You only need to hear it like that once. It was the crisp politeness of it that bothered me, not the volume. It sounded like it belonged outside a front door, not on a ridge. Cole stood up and said, "Hey, if there's a person out there, come say hi. We have extra water." His voice was big and cheerful, the way people talk to dogs they don't know. Nothing. Then we heard something like a breath catching, except far away. The wind shifted and the pines hissed for a second. It started to feel colder than it should for August. Mason leaned over and whispered to me, "This sucks." "Yep," I said. We went to bed with the plan that no one opened their tent for any reason. If you had to pee, use a bottle. I told everyone to keep their headlamps off and their zippers closed, and I felt insane saying it, because how often do you make rules like that with your friends on a trip? But no one argued. Lying in a tent in the dark with the wind picking up is weird in your head. Every flutter of fabric becomes footsteps. Every creak is a hand. That night, I had this sensation again that someone was standing just outside, one palm pressed to the tent wall like they were testing it. It made my skin crawl in a way I can't describe. The pressure moved along the side, down near my feet and up toward my head. Then it stopped. I heard it again. 3 knocks. Another pause. 3 more. Then clear as day, Hannah's voice said, "Cole? Hey, I think I found something. Can you come look?" I couldn't help it. My head turned toward their tent even though there was nothing to see. I heard Cole zip slowly, like he was trying not to make sound. I sat up, heart in my throat. Before he could open the door all the way, Hannah whispered, "Don't." Her voice came from right next to me, from her actual bag. There was a beat of silence, like the woods were waiting, and then the not Hannah voice said again, a little more insistent, "Cole, I found something." "Get away from our camp," Hannah said, not loud, not aggressive. She said it like she was politely declining a salesperson. Something stepped heavily but carefully, if that makes sense. Like it had weight, but it was trying not to leave tracks. It moved toward the drop-off. For a second I thought it would be gone. the way some animals decide you're a hassle. Then it did something that made me shake so hard my teeth clicked. It repeated everything Hannah had said since we zipped our tents. Don't. Then get away from our camp. Then the sound of her exhale. Then get away from our camp. Each time a little wrong. Like somebody learning a phrase in a language they don't speak. It got the words right, but not the breath, not the rhythm. It practiced all the way into the trees. None of us slept after that. At first light, we packed like we were in a race. No coffee, no breakfast. We wanted the valley, the creek, the final stretch, anything but that ridge. I made a call I'll regret forever and didn't say it out loud. I thought, if we move fast enough, it can't keep up. We should have left the loop right there and dropped straight down. We should have bushwhacked to the road and just walked until we found help. Instead, we stuck to the plan. Plans keep people calm. Plans make you feel like you're in control. That's the saddest lie we tell ourselves outdoors. The old logging road up there wasn't much of a road anymore. Alder and huckleberry had colonized it. You could see where trucks used to go by the way the trees formed these two long trenches, and the center rose up with undisturbed moss. The air smelled like sun on sap. Every time the breeze moved through the brush, my brain decided it was a person stepping off the road. We didn't talk unless we had to. After a while, the road curved left on the map. In real life, it curved right. We checked our compasses. We checked the sun. The map didn't match. It was old, I told myself. Logging roads get built and abandoned and rebuilt. It's fine. When we rounded the curve, we came face to face with our campsite from the ridge. Same twisted pines, same flat shelf. I swear it smelled faintly of our stove fuel. The only difference was our footprints weren't there. It was clean, like we'd never been. We all stood still like deer. I could feel the panic getting ready to break into a run in me, and I knew if that happened, we'd get hurt. I said, "We're okay." We went in a circle. It happens. We'll backtrack. We'll take the side spur. We'll drop down to the creek and pick up the loop there. I said it to keep everyone moving. We turned around. Knock, knock, knock. From behind us. Mason swore loudly. He picked up a fist-sized rock and threw it into the trees as hard as he could. The rock hit something that wasn't a tree. It hit something that moved a little, with no leaves to rattle, and then dropped into the brush. The knock came again, closer. That politely patient rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. "I hate this," Hannah said quietly. We backtracked. We dropped off the road at the spur that looked like it headed toward water. It actually did head toward water. We could hear the creek within 10 minutes, and I thought I was going to cry with relief. If you can find water and follow it down, you can hit a bigger stream, maybe a beaver pond, maybe a road. That's Wilderness 101. Only we couldn't see the creek. We could hear it, laugh at us through the trees, but the slope stayed flat and the sound never changed. We hiked toward it for an hour without the sound getting louder. Do you know how wrong that feels? Like walking toward a train and it never gets big. Like the rules were suspended. We came into an opening with a fallen log across it like a bench. For a second I was happy to sit. Then I noticed the log was not fallen. It was placed. 3 rocks had been stacked at one end. The top one wore a little crown of red ribbon. Nobody said anything. We kept walking. After that, it was like the forest wanted to tell us jokes, bad ones. We saw the same 3 trees with a twist of bark peeled off at belly height. We passed a stump that looked exactly like the one where Mason had stopped and retied his boot earlier. But that could happen in any forest. What shouldn't happen is seeing your own boot prints going the other way, and then stopping dead like you couldn't decide which direction to proceed. We followed the prints back to where the dirt turned to needles. The prints ended there. Not faded. Ended. Like someone had lifted each foot and set it down in the air. Hannah started crying silently. She put her hand on my arm like if she took it off, she'd get blown away. "Okay," I said. "We need help. We're going to go toward the sound of the creek together, and we're going to stick together, and we're going to keep going until we hit something man-made." We locked arms. It looked dumb, and it worked. When one person wanted to drift, the other 2 held them in place. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a test. We broke out of the trees onto a tiny old clearing with waist-high grass and a post in the middle. Nailed to the post was a sign with the Ranger District logo and the word decommissioned in big block letters, and under that, in smaller print, Forest Service use only. Behind the post, half sunk into the ground like a shipwreck, was a 1-room cabin. The door hung open. The windows were empty holes with black inside. I have never been happier to see government font in my life. We yelled hello and stepped onto the porch. The boards bent under our weight. Inside, it was dust and mouse turds and a metal desk with 1 drawer open. There was a logbook on the desk, the kind with grids and columns. We gathered around it because we wanted instructions, I think. We wanted someone with a badge to tell us what to do. Someone at some point had made notes in it that weren't official. The early entries were boring. Snowpack, trail conditions. The later ones were, I don't know what they were. "Do not answer when it uses your name," one said in pencil. "If it knocks, ignore. If it asks, decline. Won't touch the fire," another said. "Won't step across a circle, but it learns your circle. Soot works some, salt works best." People went missing. June 84, August 98, July 2003. Family reported voices. Between the lines, someone had written, "The polite one knocks." I looked at the dates. I looked at the way the pencil dug in hard like the hand that wrote it was trying to push through the paper. I flipped back a couple pages and saw a pressed wildflower taped to a page. And under it, "For Eliza." Someone had tried to erase it so the name was faint, like they didn't want anyone else to see. Cole was talking out loud to work it out like he does when he's stressed. Okay. Someone was messing with hikers. The Rangers didn't want people here. They wrote warnings to freak their friends out, because that's funny when you live in the woods too long. It's a thing, like ghost stories. Ghost stories don't follow you around in daylight, Hannah said. Ghost stories don't knock. The breeze came through the window and made the papers on the desk flutter. Outside, something shifted in the grass. Not a deer, not a small animal. The grass lay down in a line like something huge dragged itself past quietly. The smell changed for a second. Damp earth, iron, something like penny and smoke. "We should leave," Mason said. "I don't care if it's fake. I can't be here." The logbook had one more comment on the page. Water running fast confuses it. Leave before the third night. We were already heading into night 2, with the valley as our plan for night 3. No thanks. We stuffed the logbook into my pack. I know I should have left it there in case someone else needed it someday, but it felt like if we left it, the words would disappear. I wanted proof that someone else had seen this. On the way off the porch, we found evidence that made my stomach twist. Hanging from a nail on the outside wall was a red ribbon, new and bright. Tied next to it was a little bundle of twigs, the kind a bored person makes without thinking. Except 3 of the sticks were snapped at the same angle, so they made 3 identical lengths like tally marks. We didn't run. Running would have felt like admitting we were prey, but we walked fast enough to get sloppy, down a slope, through ferns that soaked our pants to the knee. We dropped onto gravel like the voice of God. It was a road, real and wide and rutted, but obviously used sometimes. There were fresh tire marks, and not illusions either. You could put your finger in them and feel the crumbled grit. We followed the road until it came to a gate. Past the gate, 3 more rock stacks stood like a little welcoming committee. Red ribbons fluttered on all 3 in the faintest breeze. My eyes fell apart. It felt like the forest pressed its forehead against the glass beside my brain and smiled without its mouth. "Back over," Mason said, and put 1 foot on the lowest bar of the gate like he was going to climb it anyway, and barrel past the stacks. The air on the other side felt colder, like a freezer that's been opened. The first knock hit the gate itself. The metal hummed. We didn't climb. We turned and took the road the other way. 100 yards down, it forked. 2 identical tracks, both faint but visible. You don't think about how terrifying choices are until you're afraid of making the wrong one. Everyone stood and waited for me to pick. I did rock, paper, scissors in my head and chose left. A mile later, the road dead-ended at a blowdown so thick it would take a crew with chainsaws a week to clear. We scrambled through anyway, scratched and swearing. On the other side of the blowdown, we found a campsite. Our campsite. The same log moved next to the fire ring. 2 flat spots for tents. Even a length of cord tied around the same 2 trees, like a nerve between them. No footprints. No food wrappers. Just waiting. "My God," Cole said softly. "It's funny. It thinks this is funny." I wanted to keep going, but the light was messing out on us. The forest was going to go black before we could find anything better. We had to make decisions to stay alive, not to feel good. We pulled our tents out like we were defusing a bomb. I told everyone to grab all the sticks we could and pile them in a circle around the campsite, like a stupid barrier. But I needed to be doing something. Hannah tore pages out of the logbook and charred them with a lighter, and we smeared the black ash in a ring around the tents because of what we'd read about soot. I know how it sounds. I don't care. It made me feel like we weren't just lying down to die. We didn't build a fire. We ate cold food. We sat with our packs on. We waited. When the first knock came, no one jumped. We were out of jumps. It came at the same steady pace. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Then a voice that wasn't any of ours said Mason's name. We didn't answer. The voice said it again, perfectly patient. The ash ring felt ridiculous. The forest pressed in like a crowd at a concert. Then it changed what it said. It used my full name, the one nobody uses, the one from the DMV. I swallowed bile. It must have seen my license when I dropped my wallet. Except I hadn't. I patted my pocket like a lunatic just to make sure. The voice said it again, closer this time, with this polite little smile in it. Hannah said very quietly, "Ask it a question." Like what? Anything that a person would know. I took a breath and said, "What color is my car?" I said it out loud, not to it, but into the air like I was asking the night. I shouldn't have done that. I know that now. I made it a conversation. There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "Blue." My car is gray. It wasn't guessing. It was telling me a fact that was wrong because facts are just another set of noises to something that learns by ear. I don't know how long the knocking lasted. The way your brain handles time when you're scared is not rational. Hours feel like rings of a tree. Layers build up. I remember at some point my legs went numb, and then the pins and needles came, and that meant I was still alive. At some point, I started to fall asleep sitting up, which I didn't think was possible with adrenaline. That's the scariest part of all of this to me. Your body will betray you in the middle of a nightmare to make its own nightmare. Somewhere around what I think was 2 a.m, the knocking stopped mid-sentence. It had been saying variations on our names and little phrases it had stolen from earlier. It stopped like someone pressed pause. Then I heard it take in a breath of air. It sounded like it was standing maybe 5 feet from the ash ring. I could hear the wet in the inhale. The ash ring gave me courage I didn't deserve. I whispered, "Don't come in." It whispered back, the exact shape of my whisper, "Don't come in." That was when I started to cry, quietly and angrily, because it wanted me to. It had learned that too, I think. It had learned quiet anger tastes different than loud fear. I pressed my forehead against my knees and breathed through my nose, and I swore that if we got out of this, I'd never come back to this forest again. Not even on Google Maps. Not even in my head. At dawn, the first bird sang. You don't realize what a miracle that is until you've spent a night with a thing that doesn't understand dawn. That bird cut something in half for me. The knocking didn't come back with the sun. The air got warmer by a degree. We stood up like a group of 80-year-olds and started moving. We smeared more soot at the tent doors for the 30 seconds it took to pack everything with new dexterity. We shouldered our packs and I said, "Creek." Now the word felt like a rope we could all hold. We headed toward the sound. It was there, laughing, always around the corner, but now it got louder the more we moved. We broke through into a gully full of rocks, and there it was, water actually moving. We scrambled down. The stones were slick and we almost ate it, but we got our boots in the water and the cold made me gasp. I don't know if you've ever had the feeling that the air behind you is holding something back like a dam. That's what it felt like on the rocks. The creek chopped around my shins, and it was like the rest of the forest couldn't cross. I told everyone to follow the creek down, in the water if we had to, even if it trashed our ankles, because the logbook had said water helped. Whether that was folklore or physics didn't matter. We waited for maybe an hour. That might be wrong. It could have been 15 minutes. My memory is a deck of cards shuffled by a kid. We came to a place where the creek ran under a culvert. That meant a road was above. I wanted to scream. We scrambled up the bank and struck gravel and then real dirt with ruts and a crown. Tire tracks. Oil drips. The smell of dust that cars make. We hadn't made it to heaven or anything, but it felt profoundly human in a way that hurt. We walked. Our legs didn't want to, but they did. Around a bend, a green truck sat with the Ranger District symbol on the door. For a second, all of us froze because the truck was parked at a weird angle, like whoever had pulled in had done it in a hurry. Then the driver's door opened, and a woman in a brown uniform stepped out and pushed her hat back and squinted at us in the morning light, like we were an optical illusion. She said, "Y'all good?" And we were, and we weren't. We told her we'd gotten turned around. We didn't tell her the rest right away because you sound insane with that stuff fresh on your tongue. She asked if we needed medical. No. She asked if we had water. Yes. She asked where our car was. We described the trailhead. She said we were a long way from where we thought we were. She gave us a ride on the tailgate, and the feeling of the truck moving that hummed through your bones almost made me sob with relief like a child. She fed us jerky and told us a story about a bear stealing a backpack at a campground, like she'd told it 100 times. At the trailhead, she waited to make sure our car started. Before she left, she gave me a look I couldn't read. It was like a teacher wondering whether she should say the thing that might change a life. She didn't. She said, "Take care," and drove off, and the sound of the truck fading felt like the end of a chapter. We got in the car. We were silent for a long time on the highway. The tension took so long to drop that when a billboard flashed by, it startled me. Everyone was vibrating in their own way. Mason kept opening and closing his fists like he wanted to catch something and throw it away. Hannah had tears dried on her face in long tracks. Cole had this thing he does when he's scared where his mouth goes tight and won't open. I tried to make a joke about dinner pancakes. Only the word pancakes got stuck, and I had to swallow it down. We pulled into the first diner we saw because that was a ritual, and rituals feel safe. The waitress gave us extra napkins for no reason and called us hon, and I almost proposed to her out of gratitude for her being a person in a building with lights. We sat there pushing eggs around, and I pulled the logbook out of my pack and slid it onto the table. Fat black fly guts were smeared on one page. I flipped to the entries, and the pencil marks looked smaller in fluorescent light. We read them again. Mason put his finger on the line that said, "The polite one knocks," and he said, "This is the dumbest sentence I've ever been grateful for." Before we left the diner, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. We hadn't had service in the forest, so everything came through at once. I hit play without checking the number, and I listened to a recording of my own voice that said, "Don't come in." It said it 3 times, each more wrong, like a funhouse mirror bending a word until it breaks. It wasn't a butt dial. It wasn't a friend mocking me. It was the exact sound I had made. The breath between my teeth. The way I swallow at the end of sentences because I hate the feeling of spit in my mouth. The number was all zeros. We sat there, 4 adults who'd done a perfectly reasonable thing for fun, and stared at a phone like it had pulled a rabbit out of skin. The waitress came by with more coffee and saw our faces and asked if everything was okay. I said yes automatically. People say yes on autopilot a lot. She set down the pot and asked if we needed directions. I wanted to ask her if she'd ever heard knocking in the woods, but I couldn't be that person right then. Instead, I said, "No, but thank you," and meant the thank you in a way I don't usually. We went home. Hannah and Cole stayed at my place that night because no one wanted to be alone. We left the TV on all the way up so there would be always noise. I made a plan to return the logbook to the ranger station somehow, but then my brain sent this old superstition through like a submarine ping. If you go back, you'll find the station already has the book, and you'll have to ask yourself what you're holding. The nightmares started simple. We'd wake up to the sound of gentle knocking. It was never the door. It was always the wall next to the bed, carefully timed so you could mistake it for a neighbor at first, then placed exactly wrong so you knew a person couldn't get there without levitating. The knocking always came in threes. Then it would wait. Then it would try again. Our brains started to fill in the breaks with sounds that weren't there. The brain hates blank space. The second week, I went out to my car and found a strip of red ribbon tied to my side mirror. You can roll your eyes and say someone was messing with me, my neighbor's kid, a random prank. I stood in the parking lot and held that ribbon and felt like a joke being told to only me. I cut it off with my key and threw it in the dumpster behind the building. When I came back up to my apartment an hour later with groceries, the same ribbon was tied in the center of my front gate, in a perfect bow at my height. I moved the next month. I told people I wanted more space. The new apartment is fine. It has 2 windows that face a maple, and in the fall the light goes amber like a cheap filter. I've grown a habit of leaving the bathroom fan on at night to fill the silence with a mechanical ocean. I put salt in a jar beside the bed. I don't know if that's anything but symbolic. I don't particularly care. I tried camping again 6 months later. Not real camping. A commercial campground with RVs and kids on scooters, and a guy playing a guitar badly 2 sites over. Safety by density. I thought, okay, that thing had a ZIP code, and this place has a firewood honor box and a Coke machine. I'll be fine. I was for a while. The kids quieted down. The cranky-looking guy in the site next to me offered me a beer that I didn't take, and we traded nods like middle-aged men do. I crawled into my tent and texted Hannah that everything was fine and that I was proud of myself for trying. I fell asleep to the hum of electricity in the campground. Sometime after 1, I woke up because I'd heard something. Of course I had. I lay very still and waited to see if I was going to make it real by listening harder. Then, from right behind my head on the outside of the tent, I heard 3 polite knocks. I had the feeling you get when you know a story is making the jump from a place to a person. The knocks came again, and then the cranky guy from the site next door said, "You good in there?" Except he didn't. It was his exact voice, the exact nasal way he clipped his G's, but it was wrong in the rhythm. It put the stress on the wrong word. "You good in there?" Like a language line in a phone commercial. I didn't answer. It said, "You good in there?" Again, softly. Then it said, in my voice, "Don't come in." Once, twice, 3 times. I packed in 20 minutes flat, breaking an aluminum steak clean in half in the process. I left the steak in the ground like a little silver gravestone and didn't go back for it. I drove home with my brights on and the music off, and could feel my heart beat in my gums. I wish I had a good ending for you. I'm not going to tell you we went back with a crew and performed a ritual and now the valley is safe. I'm not going to tell you the ranger called me weeks later and told me I was brave and clever, and they'd been trying to figure that thing out since '84. The ranger did call, but it was to ask if she could come by and pick up the logbook I'd accidentally stolen. I told her yes. When she came, she brought a younger guy I think was new to the job. He had that eager, slightly cavalier ranger energy that can be charming and a little scary when you've seen more than he has. They sat at my little table, and I made coffee because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The older ranger looked at the jar of salt beside my bed and didn't comment. I told them the story, the whole thing, all the parts you're supposed to leave out so you don't sound crazy. I expected to see that polite, pinched expression people use when they're trying to figure out where you went wrong. Instead, she nodded at a couple of the pieces like she was ticking off items on a list. When I got to the knocking on the metal gate, she wrote something down and underlined it. The younger ranger kept glancing at the door like he was imagining knocking happening right then. I felt bad for him, honestly. It's not fun to put new gravity into someone's work life. When I finished, she took a long drink of coffee and said, "Here's the part I can put in a report. The map is old. The road is patchy. People get turned around. That station's supposed to be boarded. Somebody took it down. We'll fix it." She paused. "Here's the part I can't put in a report. Sometimes the valley repeats. Not the way you think. The way water repeats when it hits rock. It's not a superstition. It's a shape." She slid the logbook into her bag like she was returning something to a friend. "Don't go back. That's all." I asked her if she believed the bits about the knocking. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked me if, growing up, the older people ever told me to count breaths when I walked past a cemetery. I said yes. She smiled a little and said, "See? We don't need to teach people to be afraid of fables. We need to teach them how to be polite to things that don't pay attention to people." When she left, she shook my hand carefully, like my fingers were important to my job, which is typing. The newer guy said, "If you ever do go back, don't go after the third night." Then he flushed a little like he knew he shouldn't have said it. Then they were gone, and my apartment was quiet, except for the fan in the bathroom and the small sound a fridge makes when it sighs. You want a piece of advice at the end of this? I know I would. Here is what I have, and it's not supernatural. It's practical. If you hear something in the woods that sounds like a person but isn't moving like a person moves, that isn't talking like a person talks, don't answer. Don't play with it. Get to running water and follow it down. If you smell coins in a place where a person wouldn't be bleeding, turn around. If you find stacks of rocks with new ribbon, you are not the first, and you may not be the particular dinner that night, but you are definitely on the menu. It's been 2 years. It doesn't knock as often anymore. Or maybe I've drowned it out with background noise. I still go outside. I still walk trails in daylight with runners and dogs and kids who throw rocks off bridges and listen for the splash. In the bright, the world feels hard to bend. But every so often, when I'm at my kitchen sink and the light hits the glass in a way that makes the room look like an aquarium, I hear, very faintly, from the wall behind my head, 3 careful taps, and then nothing. Like someone checking to see if I'm still home. Last month I got a package with no return address. The box was just big enough for 1 book, and inside, under a packing slip that said Fulfillment Center and nothing else, was the logbook. The same smears, the same pages, the same pressed flour. I flipped it open and every page was blank again. The pencil had been erased so thoroughly the paper was fuzzy. On the inside cover, in blue ink at a slant, someone had written, "Sorry. Please return." They'd underlined please 4 times. I took it to the ranger station. The building was the kind with siding that makes everything look like a dentist's office. A college kid at the front desk took it and disappeared into the back. The older ranger came out 10 minutes later and put her hand on the book like a pastor and said, "You're a good person for bringing this back." I told her I hadn't kept it on purpose. She nodded. Of course. Things have a way of staying with people. On the way out, I looked at the notice board by the door, where they put pictures of animals and warnings about burn bans. There was a small flyer, black and white, the kind you'd expect someone to print at home. It said, "Missing. August. Male, 29, brown hair. Last seen near the old road." A photo of a guy in sunglasses smiling at a lake, the reflection of a woman taking the picture inside his lenses. A phone number with the last 4 digits scratched out and replaced by pen. The month was this August. The paper was fresh and the staple was shiny and new. I went home and I didn't tell anyone that part for a while because it felt like a betrayal. I'm telling you now because if it is your friend on that paper someday, I want you to know that if you hear a polite knock in the woods, it's not necessarily a stranger. It might sound like the voice you're hoping to hear. It might be able to say your full name like a DMV worker who's read it off a slip. It may be patient enough to stand outside your tent all night long and practice how you breathe. Being polite is not the same thing as being good. The other night, I woke up to 3 taps on the wall. I lay there counting heartbeats. I don't know why counting helps, but it does. 30 is survivable. After a while, the tap stopped and I almost smiled. Then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. No number. I pressed play and listened to the sound of a creek. It was actually peaceful. Then, in the middle of the water, my own voice said, "Don't come in." And in the background, very faint, someone laughed. Not cruel, just soft and pleased, like we were doing a joke together. The voicemail ended with 3 taps. I didn't call the Rangers again. I turned on the bathroom fan, and then I got in my car and drove to the all-night grocery store and bought 6 pounds of salt and left half of it in a heavy line along my windowsill and half of it in the trunk. It won't help, probably. It makes me feel like I'm doing something besides waiting for knocks. I tell you this because nobody believes scary camping stories until they're sitting up in a tent with their mouth open, listening to a voice that doesn't belong to a person ask them to unzip the door. A lot of people think they'll be brave. Maybe you will be. Maybe you'll refuse to talk to it. And you'll follow water. And you'll see the ranger truck in the morning. And the hum through your bones will feel like a benediction. Maybe you'll go home and you'll make a big deal out of pancakes to stitch something comforting over the parts that frayed. You'll still hear 3 taps sometimes. And you'll be okay. Because okay is a flexible word. There were 4 of us on that trip. We came back 4. That's the part I almost don't want to mention, because it makes the rest easier to shrug off. The horror is usually sharper when someone's missing. But that's not the point of this. The point is that we met something that wanted to be invited. It knocked. It asked questions using our sounds. It stood politely outside a line of ash and thought about the shape of a circle. It wanted what a lot of things want, I think. It wanted in. If you go camping this season, you'll have normal things to worry about. Bring enough water. Hang your food. Keep your headlamp where you can grab it. Let someone know where you're going. I would add one more thing to your list. Don't answer the knock. If you hear your own voice tell you otherwise, it's lying. And if you find a photo on the trail of a campsite that looks exactly like yours, leave it where it is. That's not a memory. That's bait. I've done a lot of dumb things in the woods, but borrowing a lantern at the trailhead is the one that still keeps me up. Before you roast me, you have to understand the setup. This wasn't some midnight breaking into a graveyard situation. This was a normal August weekend plan. Hike in, camp near a hot spring that locals swear is totally worth the drive. Soak until we prune up, eat too much, and come home feeling like we'd done something good for our joints and our mental health. The trail is on the east side of the mountains, high country rolling down to Lodgepole Flats, the kind of place where the dust hangs golden in sunbeams, and you can smell dry pine before you see it. Our group was 4. Me, obviously. My cousin Elena, who can out-hike me despite pretending she can't. My friend Derek. Everyone calls him Trooper, because he used to be one of those scout leader guys who knows 47 knots and can coax flames out of wet bark. And Ben, who I knew from work. Ben's the quiet one you think isn't paying attention until he drops a perfect comment you'll be laughing about for weeks. We left town at an irresponsible hour in the morning, ate gas station breakfast burritos that turned instantly into regret, and hit the forest road while the world was still rinsing the night off. The road was washboard and potholes. We passed a road closed sign pulled off to the side with yellow tape chewing on itself in the breeze. Trooper said, "They always leave those up too long," like he was reassuring the road as much as us. The trailhead had one of those wooden kiosks with a plexiglass-covered map and a spot for trail registers. Except somebody had unscrewed the plexiglass at some point, and the paper underneath was sun-bleached into an abstract painting. There was a register box with a little metal lid and a pencil tied to it with frayed orange flagging. People had written the usual stuff. 2 nights out Sunday. If we die, tell Reddit. I wrote our names and the dates because I am the kind of person who believes paperwork protects you like a thin sweater. The weird thing, yeah, here we go, was the lantern. The kiosk had a second little shelf, the kind that usually holds brochures about bear safety. Sitting dead center on that shelf was a vintage green Coleman lantern, complete with a glass globe and a metal bail handle, and the kind of chipped paint that says it's seen more summers than you have. A card was wired to the handle with a twist tie. On the card, in neat black Sharpie, someone had written, "Borrow if needed. Please return before dark." We all stared, because that's a sentence that makes a shape in your head whether you want it to or not. Trooper leaned in and checked the fuel cap like a dad at a yard sale. "It's full," he said. "Somebody cares about this thing." Elena squinted at the card. "Please return before dark," she read out loud. "Cute. Like the library." Ben said, "What happens if you don't?" He smiled when he said it. It was a joke. He's the guy who reads all the little signs and makes a joke out of the punctuation. But you know how jokes hang around longer than they need to sometimes? That one did. I said, "We don't need it. We've all got headlamps. We're good." Trooper cupped his hand around the mantle and clicked the lantern's pump out of habit. "Headlamps break," he said. "Glass stays glass." He means well. He likes redundancy like other people like dessert. He looked at me like he was asking permission, even though I wasn't in charge of anything. "It's an honor system," he said. "We'll bring it back." Before dark. He said the last 2 words with a little theater in his voice. I wanted to be the person who says no because of a vibe, but we were right there in daylight. It felt weird to be weird. "Fine," I said, "but you carry it." He grinned and slipped it into the side pocket of his pack, handle hooked under a compression strap so it wouldn't swing. The light caught the glass and made a little ring on the kiosk roof like a sundog. So that was us. Idiots with extra illumination. We shouldered our packs, took the obligatory before picture in front of the trail sign, and headed up into green shade. The first couple miles felt like exactly what you sign up for when you say you want to hike. It was all pine duff and filtered light, and the creak of straps over your collarbones, the little crunch of gravel under your heels. Dragonflies dive-bombed the sunny patches. Chipmunks scolded us like we owed them rent. The air had that faint mineral smell that says water somewhere is wearing down rock grain by grain. We came to a junction with a newer-looking sign on a peeled log post. The arrows were routed clean. Spring arrow, Lake Camp arrow up, Overlook arrow left. Except all the letters had been sanded down until they were just smooth channels. You could still read the words if you knew what they should be, but your eyes kind of slid over them like they didn't want to stick. Elena ran her finger along the spring arrow and said, "Who vandalizes by sanding?" She said it like she was honestly curious. There was also a little carved message in the post right under the arrows, small and careful. "Come quiet." We looked around like whoever carved it might be right there to explain. No one. The air moved through the needles with that soft, steady sound that will always be both background music and loud as hell if you're thinking about it. "Okay," Ben said. "Come quiet. Got it." He said it like he was telling the forest he heard it. The trail switched up through old burns and fresh growth. You could see where the fire had laddered up trunks and blown out the crowns years back. And now the little trees were doing their best imitation of a crowd at a concert, all of them reaching the same direction like they wanted to see the band. We hiked. We sweated. We told stories. We were normal. It was somewhere on the third switchback that I noticed the step thing. You know how you get tuned into your group's rhythm? The footfalls make a kind of music. Derek always plants a little heavy on the right when he's tired. Elena's ankles scuff if she's zoning out. Ben walks like he's carrying a tray that might spill, careful but brisk. You hear it without hearing it. I started to hear one more. No big deal. People pass you out there all the time. I stopped and stepped aside to let them go around. Everyone else stopped. No one passed. We waited. The extra step took one more. That's the part that matters. The one more step when everybody else stops. Elena raised an eyebrow. I raised mine back. Trooper did the thing where he pretends he's not listening. Ben said very lightly, "Must be a deer." And we nodded like that made absolute sense. It half did. Deer can sound like people if you haven't had enough water. We kept going. A minute later I heard it again, the extra step, like someone following just a little too close and trying to match you. I stopped. One more step. This time a little closer. Not like a crack-you-over-the-head horror movie. More like someone testing how casual they can act. I told myself it was a branch easing back into place after we brushed it. I told myself a lot of things. It didn't matter. That step wasn't an animal or a branch. It felt like someone who wanted me to know they were back there, and also wanted me to think I was the weird one if I said so. We reached the spring mid-afternoon after a short spur trail that pitched down through ferns. The place was almost cartoon pretty. The hot spring itself came out of the side of a hill as a steaming little creek that ran through two shallow pools before spilling into the cold along the main creek. Somebody had lined the upper pool with rocks so you could sit. The lower pool was big enough to float back in if you let your legs go numb. There was an old CCC shelter 100 yards downstream. 3 walls, a low roof, a raised sleeping platform in the back, a rusted-out stove you're not supposed to use anymore but everyone has when it's snowing. A sign over the open side said, in Green Forest Service font, closed to overnight use due to structural concerns. The sign had been there long enough to have moss growing on 2 of the nails. Somebody had tucked a prayer card to Saint Christopher under one corner. We found a flat spot under some lodge poles above the spring, with enough trees for bear hangs and enough grass to convince yourself you were getting a mattress. We dropped packs with that groan that's both relief and regret, and did the setup dance. 1 person clears pine cones, 1 person stakes tent, 1 person fusses with the fly because it never seems square even when it is. Trooper hung the lantern on a branch while he got his guy lines right. It looked like an ornament in a Christmas tree farm photo. The card on it fluttered a little. Please return before dark. Who puts a due date on daylight? Ben said. He had his boots off already, and his toes were making happy toes in the grass. I went to the kiosk of the CCC shelter because sometimes there's good info posted in those little plastic holders. There was a laminated sheet thumbtacked to a beam, wavy from heat. Hot spring use. Pack out your trash. No soap. Leave no trace. Someone had added a second sheet under that. Paper instead of laminated. Neat letters again. Same hand as the card at the trailhead. I would swear to it. It said, if you borrowed the lantern, hang it east of your tent door before last light. Do not set it on the ground. Do not bring it inside. Thank you. Underneath, in the smallest print they could manage. Come quiet. I walked back to camp with that paper in my head. East of the door. I don't usually think about my tent door like it has compass directions. Sun sets in the west. East is where it rises. I stood in the middle of the clearing, turning like a cheap sundial. Which way is east? I asked. Elena pointed without looking up from her stakes. That way, she said, which I appreciated and did not trust at the same time. Trooper set the lantern on a branch to the right of his tent flap. The east, if we'd gotten the snake of the sun right. He tied the bale so it wouldn't swing if the wind kicked up. Ben stood next to me. Feels like rules for a board game you never asked to play, he said. Hang your light on the east. Do not invite it across the threshold. I gave him a look. He shrugged. I read books. We ate an early dinner. Backpacking food always feels like cheating when it's hot and you're above sea level. The sky went lavender behind the trees, and the steam from the spring looked like ribbon. There was a bird doing the same 4 notes over and over in a way that made you want to ask if it was okay. We changed into spring clothes, which is just shorts you don't mind getting gross, and slid into the upper pool trying to look like we weren't flinching. It was hot but sittable. You can feel your muscles say, "Oh, thank God," the way you feel a cold beer after mowing a lawn. We soaked until our fingers went wrinkly. Trooper told a story about getting caught in hail with middle schoolers, which is pretty much a metaphor for adulthood. Elena told a story about almost getting bit by a goose at the park. Ben said he once saw a guy back an RV into a ditch, and it ruined 2 marriages. We didn't talk about the extra step, or the little neat notes, or the sanded sign. It got dark the way it does in the timber. Fast, like someone lowered a stage light, and then slower. like the tech was fading the dimmer without you noticing. We dried off and pulled on warm clothes and socks that smelled like home. Trooper touched a match to the lantern. It flared a little, then settled to that steady hiss that is weirdly comforting. He hung it where he'd tied the bale, east of the door of his tent, like the note said. It threw a warm circle with sharp shadows of our legs on the ground. The stars above the trees looked like somebody had spilled sugar and then tried to sweep it up with their hands. The first whistle came from down in the creek, not a wolf whistle or the kind you use to call a dog. 3 notes, clean as a penny dropped on glass. We all went still like prairie grass in a gust. The steam from the spring drifted a little sideways, and the lantern breathed through it. 3 notes again, same spacing, like somebody calling a kid in from playing. Elena said, "There are people," way too relieved. It's funny how we'll take anything that sounds like other humans when we're even a little spooked. Ben listened. "Nobody laughs after the second call," he said. He was right. You can hear a campsite a mile off because laughter is a flare in the night. No laughter. Just that bird doing its 4-note loop and the 3-note whistle from the creek like it was practicing on the spring. Trooper said too loud, "Evening," because he is that guy. He's the one who yells hello to bears. There was no answer except another set of 3 notes further up, like someone walking away and still whistling. We went back to our nonsense talk, and if it sounded a little staged, that's because it was. When I slid into my sleeping bag later, I tried not to look at the lantern on its branch. It hummed like a sleeping animal. I pulled my hat down over my eyes because headlamps look like staring eyes if you forget to switch them off. I lay there listening to the creek and the bird and the sound tents make when someone shifts. I think I fell asleep. Sometime deep enough into the night that the air felt thin, I woke up without being sure why. That happens a lot out there. Your body knows the mattress is 1 inch of foam and the door is a zipper. You wake up to make sure gravity didn't slip. I lay still and listened. The lantern hissed. That sound was a promise now for reasons I can't explain. The creek mumbled to itself. The bird was finally quiet. There was a soft crunch in the needles, measured and nearly polite, like someone trying not to scuff their shoes. I didn't lift my head. I didn't call out. I heard a voice in that not whisper, not normal tone you get around tents when you don't want to wake the whole camp. "Excuse me." I froze in higher definition. It said it again, closer. "Excuse me." I wanted to believe it was a ranger. I wanted to believe it was a late-arriving hiker who needed directions. The voice was not weird in the way you think voices in stories sound weird. It was exactly normal. That's what made my skin try to climb off. "Excuse me," it said, like someone at a library desk. "Is this yours?" There was a soft chime like glass tapped with a fingernail. The lantern. Trooper zipped his tent halfway. "Yeah," he said, and the word sounded like a rock put down where a rock shouldn't go. "Hey there. You need something?" Silence stretched long enough to be an answer on its own. Then the same voice said, very agreeable, "It's a nice one. You borrowed it." "I'll bring it back," Trooper said. He was all calm confidence, like the voice belonged to a real person with a radio and a badge. "In the morning. Before dark," the voice said. There was no threat in it, no curl at the end of the sentence, just the words, laid down like a tool on a bench. "That's the plan," Trooper said. I didn't move except to slide my hand over to where my knife was, which is dumb, because knives don't do anything against conversations. The soft steps moved around to my side of the tent and stopped. I could feel the pressure of a body not touching the mesh. You know that feeling? Like you could set a marshmallow on the air and it wouldn't fall? That. There was the faintest shadow. I could see it through the double wall, which is a neat trick given that shadows need light. It wasn't a shape I could hold in my head. Any time my brain tried to make a face out of it, I would blink and be back at zero. I thought I could see a shoulder. I thought I could see an elbow. I think it was just standing there like you stand when you're waiting for somebody to open the door so you don't have to knock. It said my name, not my hiking nickname. My full government name, first and last, the one my grandma writes on Christmas checks. My mouth filled with copper so fast I tasted pennies. "What?" I said, before I could stop my mouth from doing something stupid. My voice came out like I'd borrowed it from a stranger. "Did you borrow it?" the voice said. "Is it yours?" "I'm returning it," I said, because answering the first question wrong felt like cheating. "Before dark," it said again, patient as a teacher. "Yes," I said. My mouth had decided to answer questions now, apparently. "We will return it." There was a little pause, like when a cashier is waiting for you to stop fumbling with change. "Thank you," it said, bright and pleasant. Then the steps moved away with no hurry, careful not to scuff. The glass chimed once. The hiss of the lantern breathed in, breathed out. Elena whispered from her tent, "Nope." That was all. Just nope. Like a prayer. We fell back into that sleep you do when your kid's hiding from thunder, where it's not sleep so much as being as still as you can until you can't. Morning came frantic and bright. The steam rising off the spring looked like cartoon ghosts. We were all acting like we hadn't spoken to anything, making coffee, not looking at the lantern as if it would notice being looked at. Trooper took the lantern down to pack it and hissed in the back of his throat when the glass burned him. "Hot," he said, like it needed saying. "You lit it?" Elena asked. She sounded mad in a way that wasn't about anger. "No," he said. He touched the metal with his finger this time, quick. Still warm. Ben had his eyes on the card on the handle like he was expecting it to update. "Please return before dark," he read. "Sure," he said to no one. "We're on it." We soaked again because we're dumb, and because the water was the whole point, and because not soaking felt like admitting the night had moved into the day. The second go, the water felt different. Not hotter, not colder. It felt like the heat was watching me. That sounds dramatic, but there it is. The warmth had intention. I kept my shoulders under. The less of me the air could see, the better. Back in camp, I wandered down to the CCC shelter again. The laminated sign looked blanker. There was another paper tucked half behind a beam. I pulled it free. Coffee can paper, the lines faintly blue. Same hand, same pen. This one said, "Be polite. Thank the owner for the loan with your full name. Hang it back on the hook at the trailhead before the shadows touch your door. If you cannot, hang it on the east side and apologize. Do not put it inside your tent. Do not take it south of the old line. Come quiet." I scanned around like an answer would be stapled somewhere. Old line? There was a thin wire strung between two distant trees above the shelter, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, with blue-green glass insulators on nails. Something old, something to do with phones, or keeping lightning away from the shelter. The wire sagged, humming the way wire hums when wind finds it. I brought the paper back and showed the others. We're not superstitious. We're also not idiots. Rules written that neatly by a nobody have a way of making their own gravity. We're hiking out after lunch, I said. We can be back to the car in 3 hours. We'll hang it on its little hook and drive away and complain about how the spring smelled like eggs. No one argued. That's how you know you've crossed a line. People stop arguing. We packed in a hurry that wasn't frantic because we're too proud to be frantic in front of our friends. The trail up felt steeper somehow. The trees looked closer. The sun kept sliding behind clouds that came out of nowhere like a magician pulling scarves. Somewhere around the junction with the sanded sign, we hit the step thing again. I stopped. It took one more. We didn't do the polite hiker move this time. We just kept going, a little faster. When we hit the post, I ran my hand along those sanded grooves and thought I could maybe feel the letters under the letters, like something written and erased and written again. The old line showed up when we weren't even looking for it. It crossed the trail at hip height like a spider web and disappeared into the trees on both sides. Glass insulators on old nails. The wire buzzed like a fly trapped in a jar. There was a little ribbon of flagging tied to it with, of course, "Please return before dark," written on the ribbon in that exact same hand, like the forest had a font now. We ducked under without thinking, because that's what you do with things at hip height. Ben brushed it with his shoulder. He flinched like he'd been startled by a light switch. "Sorry," he said, and then hating himself for it. "Excuse me." "You're apologizing to Wire," Elena said. "Everything's a person to somebody," he said, and I don't know if that was a joke. Another mile and we were in a section of trail I didn't remember. That is a bold claim for a person who has only seen a place twice. I remembered a big snag with 3 woodpecker holes. I remembered a rock shaped like a chair. We got neither. The trail cut into a bank of huckleberries so dense you couldn't see your own knees. The dust was a little darker like a new puppy. I checked the GPS on my phone like I was going to get a signal by force of will. No pings. Of course. "Left," Trooper said, even though the trail was clearly not left. He points when he's nervous. "Junction should be left." We walked. The day got thinner. Shadows looked like stains. The lantern in Trooper's pack clinked quietly against his water bottle, and I wanted to tell it to hush. That's such a weird urge, I almost laughed. You know when you get freaked out and everything has too much personality? That. We came to a blowdown that could have been any blowdown anywhere. We climbed it like children in church clothes and dropped down the other side. The trail should have turned right. It went forward. We followed, because forward is a story your legs like to hear. The extra step stayed behind us, polite as a salesperson. There's a way your chest goes tight when you have to admit you're lost. It's the opposite of the feeling you get when you crest a hill and see water. It's like your ribs are remembering how to hug your heart too hard. That came in waves. Elena's eyes got narrow like she was doing math. Ben set his jaw in that "I'm not going to say it" way. Trooper kept a hand on the lantern bail like you keep a hand on a rail when the bus driver takes a corner too hot. We hit a clearing. It was the kind of meadow that would be lovely if it were a Tuesday, and you didn't have anywhere to be. Even ground, bunch grass up to our shins, a couple of dead snags like antennae. There was a post in the center with a metal hook nailed through it at shoulder height. The hook looked exactly like the one on the kiosk, down to the galvanization pattern. No card this time, just a hook. It faced east. No one said a word because what do you say? We walked through like we were cutting class past the principal. Past the meadow, the trail narrowed into something you'd call a track, to be polite. The wire crossed again up in the trees with insulators like blue eyes. A thread of it ran down the trunk of a big fir into the dirt and disappeared. The old line had been explained and not explained the way a dad explains old family arguments. If it kept something out, I was grateful to be on the side that had the sign and the shelf and air that smelled like sun and pine sap instead of pennies. South of the old line, I said out loud without meaning to. Don't take it south. Trooper looked back at me. We haven't, he said, like reassurance. The wire ahead was higher than shoulder height. You could have jumped and maybe grazed it if you were 12 and in track. We ducked under. The day stopped being a day after that. The sun was still up, but the color of the light said something else. You've had that happen. A storm coming that hasn't arrived yet, and everything goes vintage. The shadows got longer like time had tripped. We came out of the trees into a little saddle, and there, sitting sideways across the trail like someone had parked it and gone to pee, was a Green Forest Service truck. Door open. No one in it. It looked alive in the way machines look alive when they've been used recently. Heat still radiating. Dust not settled back on the hood yet. There was a hat on the dash with the emblem facing out like a face. Trooper stopped. He raised a hand and did the oh hey polite wave. Hello? He called. The hello bounced off trees and went somewhere we couldn't see. A figure stepped out from behind the truck. The hat wasn't quite right. The brim was the right shape, but the crown was a little taller, and the badge wasn't reflective the way most are. The person had on a forest green shirt with a blank name patch. No radio. No utility belt. No little scribble of pen in the pocket. The person had the shape of a ranger the way a snowman has the shape of a person. Afternoon, the not ranger said. The voice was not the voice from the tent. It was a different one. Chipper, steady, the kind flight attendants use when the plane jolts. You folks doing okay? I clung to the normal like a man overboard clings to a cooler. Yeah, I said. We're good. We're headed out. I wanted to ask where out was, and also didn't. The figure looked at the lantern in Trooper's pack, like you look at a kid holding an expensive vase. That's a nice one, they said. Trailhead loner? Yeah, Trooper said, cautious for the first time. We're taking it back. Before dark, the figure said, a little too quick, too happy to say the line. May I? They held out their hands. May I what? Trooper said, voice flat. May I take a look? The figure said. The words slid together like they'd been practiced. Maintenance, they added, a little late, as if they remembered people like reasons. No one moved. Then Ben did something I still want to shake him for, and also hug him for. He stepped forward, took the lantern from the side pocket like he was showing a friend his new phone, and held it where the figure could see. He didn't hand it over. He just held it like a safe thing. The figure smiled in a way that used their mouth but not their eyes. Good condition, they said. Clean globe. Fresh fuel. Thank you for looking after it. We're returning it, Ben said, very clear. Before dark, the figure said, Thank you. They stepped back. The truck's open door creaked like it had been open a lot. No key in the ignition. No anything inside except the hat staring out. The figure tilted their head like listening to something behind us. You'll want to take the ridge, they said, and pointed to the left, which was nothing but tight brush and a deer track. Then wrap down to the sign. But, and here they smiled again in that way that shows the shape of teeth without any warmth. First, could you hold the light up a bit? No. Higher. Yes. Perfect. Beautiful. They said beautiful the way people say it to babies who don't understand words. Ben held the lantern up because we are polite idiot people. The figure looked at it for a long beat, like they had all the time in the world. Then they shaped their mouth around, thank you, like a new thing to try on, and walked around the truck and behind a snag. We waited for them to walk out the other side. They didn't. We stood there with the sound of the truck not ticking like a cooling engine doesn't. The 3-note whistle came from somewhere behind the snag, too neat to be an accident. Elena said very quietly, Nope. Again. We turned right. Not left, not toward the ridge, and went back the way we'd come because apparently we still believed in the concept of the way we'd come. Trail math is dumb when your brain is made of wet newspapers. You can walk for an hour and get nowhere. You can walk 5 minutes and end up at your car. We walked a long time and got the wrong amount of places. The wire crossed us 3 more times. The first time it was high. The second time it was at knee level like a trip line and made my heart get personal even though I stepped over it. The third time it was broken and hanging and humming with the voice of a fly in a storm and a refrigerator at the same time. As we ducked under the broken part, the lantern hissed for half a second the way it does when the mantle catches. What was that? Trooper said. His voice was too big. You hear that? No, Elena said, absolutely lying. The trail spit us into the meadow with the hook. The shadows had length to them. We were nowhere near the car. If we had any sense, we'd have camped at the shelter again and tried in the morning. If we had any sense, we would not have borrowed a lantern with a note that used the word before, like it was a spell. Ben stepped into the meadow and stopped. I don't want to cross without asking, he said. Who? Elena said. Are you asking? He looked at the hook in the middle of the grass and said, out loud, We're going to take it back to the kiosk. He said it like a promise in a backyard. He said it like he didn't want to fight later. We'll hang it where it belongs. Thank you for the loan. The air got 1 shade lighter. I swear, you don't have to believe me. It did. We crossed the meadow, and nothing came out of the grass with a hat on to say the line. Back in the trees, the step thing got closer. It was right back of us now, the way your own shadow is. I could feel it almost grazing my pack. When I stopped, it took 2 steps. That was new, not 1 to prove a point. 2, like maybe I had miscounted. We took the last descent to the trailhead, at a pace that probably looked cocky if you were watching. The kiosk roof peeped through the trees like a square cloud, and I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for half an hour until I got dizzy. The kiosk looked exactly like it had when we left. Same sun-bleached map, same box with the register, same empty brochure tray. The shelf was there. The hook on the shelf was there. the space where the lantern had been sat like a mouth waiting to be fed. We walked straight to it. Trooper set the lantern on the hook and stepped back like it might bite. The card fluttered. Ben said carefully, "Thank you for the loan." And then, slower, "My name is Benjamin. Last name." He said the whole thing like he was introducing himself to a judge. "We're returning it before dark." He looked at me. Elena looked at me. We all did our lines. "I'm full name. Thank you for letting us borrow it." Trooper said his with that weird dignity he carries like a vest. The lantern did not glow. It did not sing. It just was. The glass looked like glass. The handle looked like a handle. My neck got light, like a weight I didn't know I was carrying had been removed. If you've ever taken off a mask after a long day and felt air hit your cheeks, that. A shape across the parking lot, a person-shaped shadow behind the farthest Ponderosa, shifted like someone leaning. I knew in my bones, if I went over there it would be a tree and sky and nothing else. I didn't go over there. I handed Elena the keys. "Drive," I said, because I didn't trust my hands to do anything but hold on. She drove like she was transporting a newborn. We hit the washboards and none of us complained. I didn't look back. Humans say they didn't look back when they absolutely did. I didn't. My eyes were on the little vibrating bobblehead moose on the dash, like it was intended to be a lighthouse. We made it to pavement. We made it to the highway. We made it to a town with a diner that has a clock that stopped at 2 once, and everyone pretends not to notice. We ate food that tasted like hot salt, and became myself again one French fry at a time. I don't have a cool ending for you where we solved anything. There wasn't a ranger who rolled into the lot right after us and said, "Wow, nobody's brought that back." There wasn't a news story about old loaner lanterns and courtesy systems becoming folklore. We just went home and showered and invented early bedtimes like grandparents. That night, I set my phone on the nightstand and lay there with the fan on, because moving air is a lie I like to tell my nervous system. Around 1 a.m., I heard 3 notes, clean as glass, like someone far away calling a kid in from playing. It came from under my window, which is dumb because I'm on the 2nd floor. I didn't get up. I didn't look. I pulled the blanket over my ear. I lay there and counted breaths like a child. Not because counting does anything, but because it's better than listening. Every couple of nights for a while I'd hear it. 3 notes. Sometimes softer, sometimes a little wrong, like the notes had been learned from memory. The intervals just off. Sometimes a very polite voice would say, "Excuse me," out in the hall like someone waiting for the bathroom. I didn't answer. I don't know if that's bravery. It felt like all I had. 2 weeks later, a small plain manila envelope showed up in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a Polaroid. The picture was of our camp at the spring from the previous afternoon. I know this because the lantern was hanging on the east side of the door, and Elena's sandals were on the log where she always puts them, and my favorite hat was on my pack because I can't wear a hat, and my headlamp at the same time without looking like a coal miner. The photo was taken from above somehow, like a person in a tree. On the back, in neat, small Sharpie, "Thank you for the loan. Please remember to return what you borrow. Come quiet." I took the picture to Derek because he's the only person I know who would take me seriously without calling an actual priest. He stared at it a long time and then slid it back like a drawing from a doctor. "I don't think it wants anything," he said in that measured way he has when he's saying something you can't say to most people. I think that's the point. It wants to be asked for. It wants the manners. It wants you to know the rules. It will stand at the door forever if you let it, because forever is just seconds in a row. That's not comforting, I said. I didn't promise to be comforting, he said. I promised to be here. A month after that, I was getting ready for bed, and the lamp on my nightstand went dim all at once like a thought. I tapped the switch. It popped back up to full. 10 minutes later, it dimmed again, and then brightened like someone had let go. I unplugged it and went to the bathroom and brushed my teeth with the light over the mirror. That light hummed. Steady, steady. When I turned it off, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking like it had lungs. Spring rolled into fall. The forest closed to fires. The posts on the hiking forum started talking about snowline and microspikes. A person I've never met posted a picture of the trailhead. The lantern was on the hook with frost on the globe. The card hung limp. On the back of the photo, because the person had posted two, one of the kiosk, one of their smiling group, was a caption. Cool little honor system out there. Creepy note though. We didn't need it. We left it. I typed good, and deleted it, and typed always return borrowed things, and deleted that too. I went for a walk around the block and counted breaths, which I would recommend even in the middle of a city because it reminds you that the weirdest and most reliable thing in your life is that you have a body that breathes without permission. I saw the ranger again months later at a presentation about trail maintenance at the library. She had the right hat and a real radio and a coffee cup with chips on the rim. She talked about microtrash and human waste, like the saint she is. And after, when people were gathering stickers from the table like they were medals, I asked her if the hot spring was open. She said yes, with a pause like she was thinking of other words she could say. You ever see the lantern? I asked, light as I could manage. The library smelled like paper and carpet. It felt ridiculous, like bringing a ghost into a grocery store. She tilted her head. That one? She said, and her face did a thing between a smile and a grimace. Old thing. Community project, sort of. People like tokens. They like a place to put their manners. That's a weird way to say that, I said. It's a weird forest, she said. I wanted to ask if there was an old line and what it kept out, and if you could cross it twice, or if twice made it not count. I wanted to ask if anybody had ever not returned the lantern and what happened. I wanted to ask if the word before had a radius. I didn't. The fluorescent lights made everyone look honest, and I didn't want to put a different kind of story in her day. If you're looking for moral of the story stuff to tuck in your pack, here's mine, for what it's worth. The woods are full of rules even when they're empty of people. Most are practical. Don't sleep in the low spot. Don't put your tent under a widowmaker. Know what's downwind of your stove. Some are weirder. Some sound like courtesy and are, somehow, more than that. Don't answer voices that don't belong to bodies you can see. Don't be the first to be rude. If something asks for a thing you borrowed, and the note said please, give it back when and where the note told you to. If you're told to hang your light east, do it. If someone says come quiet, come quiet. I still hike. I still sleep in nylon pockets in the woods and set my shoes neatly by the door and count how many breaths until the weird noises stop being sharp. I don't borrow lanterns. I bring extra batteries for my headlamp and a backup that weighs too much and makes me feel better. When I hit a trailhead, I look at the kiosk like a bulletin board for the part of the world we don't put on maps. Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes somebody has written a joke or a warning with teeth. Last winter, when the snow was high and plows had made the lot a rectangle out of an ocean of white, I stopped at a trailhead just to stretch my legs and breathe a minute. The kiosk was half buried. The shelf was empty. I stood there with my coffee steaming my face and listened to the way ice makes trees talk. That ping and snap. A bird sang 4 notes like it had nothing else to do. Then, from way down the valley, faint enough I could tell myself I was making it up if I wanted to, came 3 little notes, clean as glass. I held my coffee up without thinking, the way you hold up a glass at a toast when somebody far away raises theirs. It felt ridiculous and exactly right. Thank you, I said into the cold, and meant it. Then I got in my car and drove home before dark.